Hey, superstars! Welcome back to another episode of Word Up with Danny Katz. Today, I am joined once again by Word Up podcast favorite, astrologer extraordinaire, Robert Phoenix. Before we dive into today's episode, I am reminding you to click that subscribe button, to like, to share, to comment, to click the notification bell so you can be apprised of my every next episode. And to sign up for my newsletter, because even with the notification bell clicking and subscribing, I have heard that Google is suppressing my content. And your best way of keeping apprised of my every next content offering is to be on my newsletter list. Don't worry, I send them out pretty sparsely. I never share your information. You can sign up for my newsletter at dannykatz.com. As well, the way the show is organized, the first half is free for the public. So whether you're listening on a podcast platform or watching on Locals or YouTube, the first half is free. The second half is available for my paid supporters on both Locals and Patreon, where for as little as $5 a month, it's less than a cup of matcha with oat milk, you get access to all of my second half conversations, oodles of bonus content, special discounts, and advance notice on webinars, workshops, opportunities to dive in with me one-on-one, as well as group settings. So choose your favorite platform, sign up there so that you can be sure to access the second half of this and all of my podcast conversations. I think that does it for housekeeping. Buckle up and prepare to enjoy this juicy AF conversation about the ADL and other things with astrologer extraordinaire Robert Phoenix. Thanks for coming back on. I know this is our third show together. And I've been wanting to do a deep dive on the ADL with Emily for a while, but she just hasn't really locked into it. So I thought, who's smart, who knows the landscape, who's going to go there with me? So thank you for saying yes and coming on to dive into whatever the fuck the ADL actually is.
Yeah. Well, I love doing shows with you because you're really smart and you're fearless and you're great to talk with. So yeah, easy, no brainer.
Thanks. Awesome. Yay. So what inspired this was after Kanye got all the bad press for saying what he said. I think it was Kanye, or it might have been the basketball player.
But they were kind of lumped together at the same time.
Right. They were lumped together at the same time. And then the ADL swept in and slapped a fine on one of them. And I was like, how does this work? This unelected agency has declared themselves the arbiters of free speech. And when they decide someone steps out of line, they levy a fee, and then other people actually pay that fee. And then what? They're not canceled? Their house isn't burned down?
So I think the mechanics behind that was that the NBA, who is governed by Adam Silver, and when you look at Adam Silver and Jonathan Greenblatt together, they look like they came from the same reptilian batch.
Okay.
If you've ever seen Dark City, you've never seen Dark. Oh, wow. So can I do a screen share? Is that? Can you do that?
Oh, absolutely. Let me make sure you have that.
I like visuals when we can describe two people. So
of course. Wait, I'm trying to figure out how to give it to you. Participants.
And the internet it should provide me with what I'm looking for.
Okay, I'm just gonna make you host because it's not giving me the dual share option.
I promise I'll give it back.
Thank you.
So this is kind of a funny, in some ways, image of some of the characters we're talking about, and one that we did not mention, but will fit into the discussion. So that's Jonathan Greenblatt on the left. That's Adam Silver on the right. This is Harley Pasternak, who is Kanye's handler.
Right, right. And
And then,
Jonathan Greenblatt, okay, ADL president, great.
right. And then you have Nosferatu. And,
Wow, they're like quadruplets.
yeah. And Adam Silver to me always looked like Nosferatu. And I've talked about this on my show and how like this was really the first cinematic portrayal of what a vampire looked like.
Right.
Right. I mean, look at this. This is not flattering at all.
No.
This is scary, scary. So then as you track the evolution of the vampire in cinema, he becomes much more suave, debonair, and sophisticated, starting with Bela Lugosi, going up through somebody like Louis Jourdan, who played Dracula, and then you're kind of ending with Gary Oldman, right? So it's like, let's rehabilitate the image of the vampire, right? Because this is a metaphorical image, right? This is what this is representing.
Right.
But it's also in a lot of ways like not too far afield, especially from Silver. So Jonathan Greenblatt and Adam Silver, who's the commissioner of the NBA, worked together on the fine, and it was the ADL that put together everything that Kyrie was supposed to do. It wasn't just pay a fine. It was, he had to do all this community service. I mean, so Kyrie was basically being put through a re-education moment.
And or what? Like, what would happen if he didn't bow down to the ADL? What would they have done?
Well, it's not what the ADL would have done. It's what Adam Silver for the NBA would have done.
Got it.
And so when you get into stuff like this, there's lots of external pressures from sponsors and advertisers. So it wouldn't be that, hard for somebody to, let's say, target, I don't know, AT&T or, one of the phone companies of mobile, and just say, hey, look, the NBA is not being really responsive to this.
Right.
Maybe you should write a letter to them.
I did pull up the ADL's. So this is from the ADL's website.
Yeah.
And these are their corporate partners against hate, which anyone watching who understands my languaging work, if we're defining ourselves as against hate, we're only creating more hate. But these are their corporate sponsors. So I'm guessing it was like to appease Google, Coca-Cola, Comcast, Merck, PayPal, Turner.
Yeah, those are their direct sponsors, right?
Right.
And Comcast would play a role, although I think the NBA on ESPN comes through Disney, and I don't see Disney on there, but they could apply pressure easily to Disney. That wouldn't be a problem at all. So I think the ADL can exert tremendous financial pressure, and they're also very much connected to the press and the media.
Right.
So they could make their life a living hell for somebody like Kyrie Irving. And, Kyrie did his best to kind of stand up, and he kind of apologized, but not really. Kyrie's an Aries, so they don't really bow down and apologize too much.
No.
And clearly, Ye did not apologize. Like
I respect that.
Yeah. He did not apologize. And of course, look what happened to him. Basically, he got everything taken away from him. And, so this whole thing, Nick Cannon was the warm-up act. Like Nick Cannon came out and started talking about like Jews and slavery. Like he started talking about that. And then he started to talk about Jews in the entertainment business. And then they went after Nick Cannon. Of course, then Nick Cannon had to make all the rounds and go onto the Breakfast Club and apologize. So he was the first. They kind of got, this has been going on for a while,
right?
But this is where they got their modern warm-up act was Nick Cannon. So by the time they got to Kyrie, they were feeling very confident about their ability to bend people to their will and exert financial and social and psychological pressure.
Do
to
you
make
remember, did Jesse Jackson have to pay off the ADL when he called New York Town?
Town. No, I don't think so.
He got a
I, I,
pass.
I think Jesse got a pass
Mhm.
because he was a good soldier during the civil rights movement, and also had a very how shall we say interesting relationship to Martin Luther King on the
Right.
day that he died. Right. So Jesse knows where the bodies are buried. Literally, he knows where the bodies are buried.
Got it.
So he's not going to have to, I think, bend the knee that
Yeah.
much.
He's on a longer leash
Much
than
longer leash.
Kanye.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, I'm wondering, I mean, I know you did a bunch of research. I did a bunch of research. There's some modern, I mean, a bunch of modern stuff. But when I was following a hunch, and let me make sure I still have screen share. Yeah, okay. So I followed a hunch based on some of the research that I've been doing just in general. And so, in terms of, taking us back to the origin point, I'm just going to share this piece that I found, which is how Tavistock helped the ADL make the Jews victims. And so this was my original hunch about the ADL when I was like, it feels like all this woke stuff that we have now, cancel culture and victim culture. My gut was like, I feel like it was birthed out of the ADL.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
this is a longer article, but basically what it says is that the ADL put curriculum into schools
Mm-hmm.
to teach. So it says here, Dinnerstein, they call him the racist propagandist for the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith, which we know is a Masonic
Yep.
outcropping.
Mm-hmm.
Reveals that the ADL published various instructions to parents that they should make sure that their children were aware that a hostile world intended to persecute them. So that was written by the Tavistock Clinic.
So are these children in traditional Jewish schools that are getting that programming?
I believe so.
So to me, this is like the greatest example of deep cognitive dissonance that anyone could experience, right? So on one hand, children are being told that they're going to be persecuted, run from town to town to town, right? So they're going to be paranoid.
Right.
There's already built an enemy. But then on the other side of it all, they're like, well, we're the chosen people, right? We're special. And so you have this really weird thing going on. Like on the one hand, it creates this ongoing generational brooding sense of paranoia.
Right.
And on the other hand, there's the sense of, well, we're entitled, and then the goyim are cattle, right? So when you get something like that, in my kind of experience and understanding, that's how programs are created, right? You tear somebody basically in two psychologically, and so you're sending two, like, maybe those two messages converge. We're being persecuted because we are special. We're being persecuted because we are chosen. We're being persecuted because we are smarter than everybody else. Maybe that goes hand in hand. But nonetheless, right, it's one of these things where you're a victim, but then you're also, kind of this progenitor of the world that has been chosen to play a very special role in, law, medicine, business, finance, whatever. So you have these two weird poles that are running current, through a group of people and their evolutionary process. And I mean, honestly, I think it creates a bit of schizophrenia.
For sure. I mean, and I don't think I'm like standard issue person of Jewish heritage, so I didn't get that chosen bit. And my sense was, in what I'm reading about the ADL, they seem more focused on the like, you're marginalized, you're victims, you're a lesser class. It seems like the chosen thing, if that indoctrination, it seems like that's more coming out of the synagogues, out of Hebrew school.
Right.
I'm not seeing that coming directly out of ADL. It seems like, given Tavistock's influence on ADL, that it's to create division and fragmentation in culture, and you're going to get more. Well, actually, I see how both work. You're better, you're worse. Yeah, it's a total schizophrenic.
It is. Yeah. So it looks like that the architect of that program is Kurt Lewin, which I saw in that document.
Yeah.
Who comes out of the Frankfurt School.
Right.
And in the Frankfurt School, or well, I'm sorry, they're devils. That's what they are. They're complete devils. And their role is to implement their version of social Marxism. And who's in their field, right? Who's in their target zone? I don't think they have any problem moving their psychological scope around, their periscope around, to figure out where they need to use the divide and conquer, because that's what Tavistock is great at.
Exactly. Right? And they don't have an allegiance to any group. They hate all of them. It's just like, use their tactics to keep us apart. So my sense is that they started off with the Jews, and now what we've seen over the past 50 years is just taking it into gays, blacks, trans. It just seems to be spreading.
Well, so yes, absolutely. The whole thing, which for people who aren't aware, this comes out of the lynching of Leo Frank. Mm-hmm. And Leo Frank raped a young woman and went to prison. And I think it was the governor of, Mississippi or North Carolina. Anyway, just before he was about to leave, he commuted Leo Frank's sentence, under a lot of pressure, heavy duty pressure. And the locals were like, no, that's not going to work. Right. So they went out and they took justice into their own hands. And so the B'nai B'rith and $200 and an office space started the ADL after that moment. And that's where they kind of got their legs. But I think, to your point, and as I went through this material, for instance, I sent you that link to that story where the ADL is kind of interacting with the left. Mm-hmm. in the Bay Area and trying to kind of appease the left.
Right.
And now they're dealing with this so-called idea of fascism, and they're trying to kind of run the game with the left. But then they'll flip and they'll go full on hardcore Zio-Israel right? So they're shapeshifters. The ADL are complete shapeshifters, and they will use whatever leverage that they have. So when I watched Jonathan Greenblatt on The Breakfast Club mm-hmm. with Charlemagne the God, it was like, yeah, we need to stand together against evil Whitey. Right now is evil Whitey. And if I was the guys in The Breakfast Club, I'd smell that thing coming a mile away, right? You're being used again. You're this has been what's been going on for a very long time, but they're doing this thing now, right? They're trying to move into the rainbow circuit and right. bring all the dispossessed people of the world, and to make sure that they're not going to be hassled and harassed by these evil white nationalists. So in fact, just before we got on the air, I was just reading a story that Bob Kraft, it doesn't have anything to do with the ADL, but maybe a little bit. Bob Kraft is the owner of the New England Patriots, mm-hmm. and he's just pledged $25 million to fight anti-Semitism and hate. So this is...
Wait. Spurred by what? What was the inciting incident?
There is no... okay, you have the really bizarre synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. Really bizarre. The guy who theoretically did it, he's never had a trial. Mm-hmm. He's never had a trial. I'm not even sure the guy even exists. Mm-hmm. I don't know what happened with that event. Right. So there's that. And then, there's this ongoing kind of rampant rise in anti-Semitism. I think he's talking about Kanye and Kyrie. So they're trying to piggyback, on this stuff. And so, Bob Kraft gets to hang out with, some B-level, celebrities or whatever, and do these little fundraisers or events. It's just it's just greasing the wheels. But what they do is they create programs, and that's really good at what the ADL, that's really one thing that's what the ADL is really good at, is creating programs. And I got a whole list of basically press releases from the ADL right off their website. I don't know if they're there anymore, but I found them. And they're all about these programs that are in conjunction with the FBI and local law enforcement and the CIA. So you want to see any of them? I have them right
Yes,
here.
I want to see all of them. I'm going to give you back. You're the host again.
Okay. So let me, so I found some really interesting information. Let me see if I can do this.
I think one of the basic things that frustrates me so much about the ADL and their influence on culture is anti-Semitism is now become the most broad-based phrase that they will throw at anything. Like you just say, I don't like, Bob's shoes. And if Bob had a Jewish grandmother, all of a sudden that statement becomes conflated with anti-Semitism. Like that's how reckless I feel the ADL is with that phrase.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And let's be honest, what is the definition of Semitic anyway? I mean, if we're going to be really granular about Semitism, well, aren't Palestinians Semitic people? I mean, I think they are. I think Palestinians are Semitic people.
So according to Etymology Online, Semitic denotes the major language group that includes Hebrew, Arabic, Aramaic, Assyrian, distinguished by triliteral verbal roots and vowel inflection.
So it's a language-based description of a people.
Correct. That includes Arabic, Aramaic.
Right. That's pretty broad. That's pretty
super broad.
Like when you say anti-Semitic, you're basically labeling every single person in that language family as being part of the label. Oh. Pretty broad. So this goes back to 2003. And I got a bunch of these here.
And when they say programs, like, are they directly referencing like psychological manipulation?
No, these are real programs. So this is the Anti-Defamation League Southeast Region sponsored the Federal Bureau of Investigation and United States Attorney's Office Domestic Terrorism from Detection to Response on March 25th, 2003 in Atlanta. 280 law enforcement personnel from 8 southern states attended. According to Deborah Lauder, ADL Southeast Regional Director, the goal of the conference was to give each participant the knowledge and focus and tools to effect changes necessary to meet security and challenges of our post 9/11 world. And it doesn't stop there. It's like it goes all the way down into like local law enforcement.
Well, and also, why is a private group working with our Federal Bureau of Investigations? Like, even if you claim to, it's so many steps removed from their lane.
Here's another example. I mean, this is from the Dallas region. We're talking regional, regional engineering. Robert A. Martin, the Anti-Defamation League Security addressed the International Association of Chiefs of Police Committee on Terrorism at the organization's mid-year meeting in Dallas. On Texas May 2003, the meeting was also attended by representatives of the Dallas Police Force, Dallas FBI. Mr. Martin gave an overview of ADL and its expertise in domestic terrorism and hate crimes. Attendees were provided copies of the League's CD-ROM, Extremism in America, and information about the League's new law enforcement website. So this is, they were actually at one point, they were sending people over to Israel. They were sending police chiefs over to Israel, and they were getting trained by the IDF in how to deal with people. And some of that stuff started to come back. For instance, I forget who the police chief was in Ferguson, but he had gone to Israel to study how the IDF does response on this stuff. So, things started to get really, really weird post 9/11. And, the ADL was getting just tons of money. I mean, the amount of money that they get is just, it's crazy.
I pulled up their financials. Have you seen?
I was going to do that, but I could only imagine how much money they get.
Oh, it's kind of crazy. If we look at their, here, I'll take screen share back, but the amount of money that they're pulling in every year is crazy. Sorry, now it's not letting me unhost you. Oh, I got it. Okay. So Okay, so check this out. Um, so this is their investments at fair value. So these are investments they're making. Like 79 million is just how much, like, I guess, extra money they have to invest at the end of each year.
Wow. That's
I mean,
pocket
that,
change, huh?
right?
Wow.
Let me go up further. So this is cash flow from operating activities, 35 million in 2020. Cash and cash equivalents, end of year, 44 million. So they doubled between 2020 and 2019. They made 20 million more. The whole thing's so shady.
Well, hate is good for business.
Definitely.
Hate is good for business. And, they're like any other, political organization who's invested in profiting off of people's fears.
Yeah.
They're basically shakedown operations is what
They're
they
a
are.
total shakedown. They're like mafia. I mean,
Yes.
who's giving them $62 million a year? What is that about?
And I think that's above the line economy. Okay. That's above the line numbers.
Right. Like what's happening behind the scenes.
Exactly.
Totally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where is the money coming from too?
Exactly.
Like for instance, they do this with churches, right? Because the ADL and the church are both nonprofits, right? They're both nonprofits, if I'm not mistaken.
How can you be a nonprofit and then have like tens of millions of dollars to invest in mutual funds? Like, that is crazy.
Well, the other thing too is when you have all these mega churches, you can just make a donation. You don't have to say where it's coming from, right? So a lot of the mega churches are actually really good and in some cases used for money laundering, right? So,
Right.
and I don't know if this, because there's a lot of people that I think would love to catch the ADL in money laundering. So I think there are people that watch what they do, but who the donors are and where the donors are getting their money from, right? That's a whole other thing, So let's say Bob Kraft or somebody has some extra cash on the side that, they want to, they don't want to track it, right? They'll funnel it over to the ADL. You'll say, oh, great, thanks for the donation. Well, that's money in the bank for Bob Kraft,
Right.
or that's money in the bank for somebody who's going to need it somewhere down the line.
Right.
So it's an investment. And one of the things that I found, no matter what was going on at any given period of time with the ADL, is that they were always very tight invested with Israel, like very tight invested with. So no matter what was happening here domestically, that relationship was like intact. It was sacrosanct. And through APAC and the ADL, they're like the 1-2 punch in terms of lobbying and protection.
Well, and that's like the giant snow job that I'm so excited for everyone to wake up to, the conflation of Israel with Judaism, Jewishness. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It's like a deep state stronghold in the Middle East.
That's right. It's really like a center of a crime, like a crime empire, right?
Right. And if you say anything vaguely critical about like how Palestinians are treated there or anything, that becomes branded as anti-Semitic, which makes no sense. Like it's so many leaps removed.
And we just looked at what the source of anti-Semitism is. They're going to fall in the same language group, so it makes no sense at all.
Right.
Yeah. And by the way, there are other crime cities. Like New York is a part of the crime network, and London's part of the crime network, and Frankfurt is part of the crime network.
But no one gets the protection that Israel gets. Like I remember after Katrina, like those grants were being withheld from anyone who was critical of Israel.
That's right. Well,
own home soil.
Yeah, absolutely. It was happening in Rockport, Texas, and yeah, and that's not the first time. It's not the only time Greg Abbott did that. There was some other things that happened. There was a woman who got fired from her job. I think it was a school district in Georgetown, and she had to sign some anti-BDS thing in order to get her pay. Yeah, and of course Abbott also tried to get Gab banned here in Texas. Like he made a big deal about banning Gab. So we know who's buttering Greg Abbott's bread.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, he's been to the wall. There's pictures of him. All these politicos have been to the wall. Ron DeSantis has been to the wall. Trump's been to the wall. Obama's been to the wall. They've all been to the wall. They all wear the little hat and they go to the wall, right? So
it's so weird. And then this I found this other article that the new president has been like overly critical of Trump and is coming out of the Obama administration, which is flipping the sort of like left right ADL allegiance allegedly. But as you're saying, like they just kind of play all sides.
They play all sides. I mean, they're into power, right? And they'll use leverage and power any way they can. And, Greenblatt does theoretically come out of the left, and he's also got this water called Ethos. Do you know about Ethos water?
Wait, that's his
brand. Yes, Ethos.
Okay.
So he came to that through the Starbucks world because he was like a brand manager for Starbucks.
Okay.
So that's Jonathan Greenblatt's background. He's like marketing and product development, and of course he was. I think he might have replaced Rahm Emanuel's chief of staff after Rahm Emanuel left. So yeah, theoretically he comes from the left, but if you go into his Wikipedia page, it says his parents are conservative Jewish. Right. And you'll see this, like, it's really confusing, like when you get into the neocons, you'll find the same thing. This week, Bill Kristol's, a progressive. Oh, next week he's a conservative, right? They're shapeshifters, and it's clear that they have a couple of allegiances. One seems to be Israel, and the other seems to be power, and they're part of this shakedown scheme. In fact, you and I were talking earlier. There was this guy named Mo Dalitz who was kind of a Meyer Lansky figure, and he was one of the biggest donors to the ADL. And Meyer Lansky's daughter became like a fact checker for the ADL, or granddaughter, Mira Linsky, Meyer Lansky's granddaughter, went to go work for the ADL as one of their investigators. Right?
Well, that totally makes sense because they're both mob. Like it just all seems
it's
so
mob. They're mobby. They're
right.
They're totally mobby. But I guess in fairness to the ADL, they're not the only ones. But
the power they have,
huge power,
is singular. Like I don't know anyone who gets to strong arm people and like muscle money out of people or shut stories down. I mean, this one, which I'm guessing we've all probably seen this, but I'm gonna just share this piece. I found this in my kind of earlier research about the ADL. But so there was this article about Fox News deletes Soros Puppet Master cartoon after ADL calls out anti-Semitism. Yeah. And I find it hilarious when people ever defend Soros as a Jew, given that he literally worked for the Nazis, has literally come out and said he doesn't feel bad about it. He would do it again. Like he hates Jews. This was the cartoon that the ADL freaked out. So we have Soros holding these puppets, defund the police, no bail, DAs. Where is Jewishness in this? What does this have to do with being anti-Semitic?
It's a really good question. I don't think it has anything to do with it.
Nothing, but the fact that they wield that much power, that they got this, taken down?
That is the guillotine. The guillotine is to be considered anti-Semitic, right? I mean, if you're anti-Semitic or being accused of being an anti-Semite and you have professional standing, unless you walk it back and say you're sorry and I misspoke and I didn't understand, as on a professional level, you'd be screwed. If you go back to that page and you can see that they partnered with PayPal, I mean,
the global,
yeah. Now all of a sudden, things get real sticky when it comes to partnerships and speech and, penalizing people financially, right?
It's so sticky tricky because we have, like, in this one, so this is the ADL, as we've told Fox News numerous times, casting a Jewish individual as a puppet master who manipulates national events for malign purposes, conjures up long-standing anti-Semitic tropes about Jewish power. No, like, we're allowed to criticize people for being puppet masters. But one thing that I've noticed in like the cultural landscape with like PayPal and big tech and whatnot, when I got my Facebook account shut down like a year ago. It might have been longer than a year ago, but it was in this, the culture we're in now. Nothing happened. I couldn't get any customer service. I couldn't get anyone to respond to me. And I was on Twitter kind of bitching, and people were like, just play their stupid game, like play some sort of woke victim card. And so I wrote, I guess Facebook hates Jews. My account was up within 5 minutes.
Wow.
So freaking fast. And it was like, I felt disgusting and dirty for pulling that, but it was like the only card I had to play, and it actually worked, which is just even worse.
So think about the psychological impact and the effects that would have on an entire group of people.
Well, it's just like, I mean, this is why I rejected the whole thing growing up, because I was like, I'm watching everyone in my family play the victim card all the time, and it didn't sit well with me, so I rejected that. But I didn't realize that this was a whole Tavistock program that was running and was super deliberate. I mean, that's the quickest way to like disempower and fragment people, is tell them that everyone hates you and that you have it worse and you're a second-class citizen.
Right. Yeah. Well, again, I think you're entering into the deep waters of cognitive dissonance and people that have been psychically torn asunder because they're getting these dual messages that are, and maybe they could theoretically work hand in glove. Well, because of all this, we have to stick together and work harder than everybody else. So therefore, get to sleep and, crack your books. I mean, I guess I could kind of see that, but at the end of the day, I mean, I saw this video one time. This woman, do you ever watch the video channel Soft White Underbelly? Do you ever watch that channel?
Mm-mm.
So there's this guy lives in LA, and he's kind of like the Diane Arbus of video.
Okay.
And he interviews very fringy people with very fringy stories. They're all in black and white, kind of like Diane Arbus. And he had this one woman on there who grew up in a hardcore Orthodox Jewish family in New Jersey. And it was her story. And it sounded like a fucking horror story. I'm sorry. What they put her through, and eventually shipping her off to Israel because she wouldn't conform, or, but the message that she got in that household was exactly what we're talking about, like the heavy duty paranoia, right? Hardcore paranoia. But on the other hand, coming through her father, who was a rabbi, was this whole other story about, their special place with God and the chosen people. And so she's getting this weird, kind of cognitively dissonant narrative. And she eventually kind of loses her shit, It's a really interesting interview. I'll send you the link to it later.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, my guess is that happens in any Orthodox upbringing, because if you're Orthodox, it's like so extreme, it's so dogmatic, it's our tiny special group against anyone else.
I don't think you get it sometimes in Catholicism.
Okay.
Or some parts of Christianity, even though I'm probably not the best spokesperson for this, but there's this other side of Christianity, which is, I'm not worthy, right? I don't get a sense that Catholics, like your common Catholic, sees themselves as being above the fray, right?
Okay.
Like, I don't get that. Here in Texas, I don't get that the Southern Baptists see themselves as God's chosen people, only if they're saved, maybe, right? And I'm trying to think if there's any other version of orthodoxy where that may take place. I don't know. I don't know enough about Islam. Maybe there's a pocket of Islam that might have that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But clearly it's one of those paradigms where these two extremes are happening kind of at the same time. Speaking of the Catholics, by the way, on my notes, what do I have here? This is my digging. That where did I have this? It was the ADL prior to Vatican II
Mm-hmm.
was really coming very hard at this whole idea of anti-Semitism in the early 60s.
Okay.
And so there is a thread that the ADL influenced the church, the Catholic Church, to change its church doctrine that moves the blame of the crucifixion away from the Jews of Christ. That happens in Vatican II. And there's a passage from the Bible that says, and his blood will be on our sons and daughters, which I think is referring to the sons and daughters of Israel, the blood of Christ. Mm-hmm. Right. So that was always referenced pretty heavily prior to Vatican II, and they stopped referencing that. So the ADL had a role in influencing Vatican II and the role of the Catholic Church and how they viewed Judaism. So everything, and Vatican II, everything changes. The mass changes, everything changes. And there's a really strong case to be made that the ADL was working at a high level with, these church leaders inside the Catholic. I mean, some of it too is that the Catholic Church wanted to become contemporary, right? And didn't want a liturgy that was stuck in the Middle Ages and wanted to sing folk songs at church and shit like that. But clearly they moved away from a message that had been a part of the church for a very long time. And that was no longer a part of the central core of their message.
That's interesting.
Yeah. The ADL is very, very powerful, extremely powerful. And
right.
there's lots of cases of this. The story that we talked about while we were on the phone earlier today with the SFPD and the LAPD getting busted in the 90s. I mean, this is a huge story.
Yeah.
Like a major story. Like the ADL had chapters in SF and Los Angeles, and they were involved heavily in spying and espionage. And they kept files on people. And there was this one guy, Roy Bullock, who was their go-between, which you and I talked about. And he had infiltrated this group, which was this, what's the name of the group? He was the chairman. This guy, Alex Oda, was the chairman of the Arab American Anti-Discrimination League. And so he was killed by a bomb. This is in LA. He's killed by a bomb where he opens the door to his office. And one of the guys that had infiltrated that group was this Roy Bullock guy. And the police in San Francisco had busted him with all this ADL stuff. So he had the key to the office. And then these other three guys who were fingered for the explosives, they fled town and went to Israel. So they were gone. Right. So this whole thing comes up. There's this other guy who's part of it. This Tom Gerard guy who's really weird. He's ex-CIA. He's now infiltrated into the San Francisco PD, and he's navigating through there for the ADL. And they were about to bust him when they found all this evidence. He goes to the Philippines. They find the satchel that he left behind. He's got like 10 passports, 10 different identities. He's got photos of death squads. He's got a black hood. Like, this guy's really creepy, right? And he's working with Roy Bullock. They would split the money 50-50 that the ADL would give them. And Roy Bullock, who was gay, said, I may be queer, but when it comes to doing business, I'm straight as a board. That was his statement, right? So he and this guy, Tom Gerard, split it right down the middle. And then, the ADL kind of works it. They're fined $75,000. And then they take that money and they throw it into ADL sponsored groups in San Francisco to divvy the money up. So it's a total win for them. And then not long after that, well, I guess it's maybe 10 years after that, there's this guy, Bernard Parks from LA. You might remember him. He was the PD.
Mm-hmm.
In 2002, he signed an agreement with the ADL to share information.
Why are they an intelligence agency all of a sudden?
They do more than just gather. They infiltrate.
Well, they break the law. Spying on American citizens is illegal. And I mean, there are so many instances of them spying, and there are instances where they get away with it, where the judges like throw the cases out.
Except for the one case I told you about.
Right.
Which was Quigley versus Aronoff. It's Aronson, which is this really interesting story about these neighbors in Colorado that didn't get along. And the Quigleys obviously they're not Jewish, and the Aronsons are. And the Aronsons sounded like just fucking terrible people. And so what happens is that the ADL sets them up with spy equipment. So they're able to tap into the Quigleys' phone calls. And that's where they start to press charges against the Quigleys, because they've got the ADL's little, police scanners, and, all those phones back in the 80s and 90s, especially the 90s, they're all radio phones, right? So you could pick up the conversations if you had the right equipment, and that's what they're getting. So they're picking up these phone calls, and, they're passing information back and forth. Well, the Quigleys countersued the Aronsons, and they sued the ADL, and they won for $12 million. And what's funny about it is that the Quigleys had a Jewish lawyer, which I think is hilarious, right? Their lawyer was some guy named Horowitz. So it was Horowitz and the Quigleys versus the ADL, and the ADL tried to reverse the decision, and the higher courts would not do it. They're like, no, you were way outside the bounds, way outside the law, and they had to pay the Quigleys $12 million.
Which I'm guessing is still less than the basketball player had to pay them.
Probably. I'm not sure what Kyrie had to give up, but $12 million in 1990s money, that's pretty good.
Good. Yeah.
Pretty good. Yeah. So, but that's what they were capable of, right? Like, they ran to the ADL. The ADL said, no problem, we'll set you up with the spy equipment.
Well, and the fact that it hasn't hurt their standing, like, in the larger cultural discourse. Like, no, I'm not hearing anyone reference that the ADL has a spying problem.
Well, it's dangerous. I
mean, it's dangerous to criticize the ADL.
Well, I mean, think about it, right? Like, if everything we've said is true,
right?
And I wouldn't bring up any of these cases if they weren't, okay?
Right.
The amount of intelligence and intel that they have on people is probably pretty significant.
It's so true.
Yeah. So it's like, well, you remember this, like, right? And this is no different than the Cheka or, KGB, right? And if you kind of drill down, you'll probably find, like, that guy, Gerard, he's ex-CIA, and he's now working for he's in SFPD, but he's really undercover for the ADL. And I think you have a lot of overlap between the ADL and the FBI. Robert Mueller
was that legal?
It happens all the time. And I think these agencies, they're all buddy. They're all sleeping with each other. They all exchange information.
Right.
And it's like one big network, and, they probably, just trade info or sell info. So that's one of the reasons why I don't think that they've had to, go through the ringer socially, and they can always levy the anti-Semitism trope. And, that's been a flamethrower that's completely torched careers and lives.
Oh, completely. I mean, you just utter the word, and, like, the conversation is supposed to shut down, and you're supposed to be appropriately apologetic and all those things for this misused term. And
by the way, that stuff clearly is very Tavistockian, right? Because you could apply that to racist. Now it's homophobic. Now it's transphobic. It's all the same.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I'm saying it seems like the formula started with the ADL and anti-Semitism, and now we just see the formula being applied to all the other supposedly marginalized slash now privileged groups.
Right. And so who's going to be out in front, doing the legwork and the dirty work in the trenches for these groups? It's going to be the ADL. There may be a few of these other groups. They'll expand their model, right? They'll expand their model, which is what Jonathan Greenblatt was trying to do on the Breakfast Club with Charlemagne the God. He's like, yeah, we're all in this together against these evil white people. I mean, really, that's what he was saying. And the whole thing is, it's just so weird, right? Even the cognitive dissonance and looking at Jonathan Greenblatt, even though he does look like Nosferatu a little bit, he would pass for white. I mean, that's the other thing that's really weird about this whole thing.
Well, yeah, that's the other big kind of another piece of cognitive dissonance is in the like oppression Olympics scale. Jews aren't in there. Like if white people are supposed to pay reparations to gay people for not being able to be married, or black people, like that will also include Jewish people. Right. Which is how it's like kind of fuzzy in the oppression Olympics conversation.
Yeah, it is, until of course the argument or the discussion is directly related to that. And then all of a sudden they're at the top of the pyramid in the oppression Olympics, right? They've got the gold medal ribbon at that point. But if it's something else, they're usually in the background.
But kind of, but I don't see anyone, like no one's getting like affirmative action hires or college entrance because they're Jewish. Like that hasn't existed in my lifetime that I'm aware of. So it's weird. And it speaks to the cognitive dissonance that you brought about in the beginning, as far as you're chosen and you're also oppressed, where it's like, well, which is it? Because it's
right, exactly.
It's always a schizophrenic.
It's really schizophrenic.